Welcome, guys, to another episode of my high performance podcast. Today, I've got another trailblazer joining me today. His name is Jose. And the reason I wanted to bring Jose on to speak with you guys and to speak with me is because he's had a very non traditional path being an Asian Australian, which comes with its own challenges. But he's an Asian men's coach, he's an actor, and I believe he's also a comedian. And he does public speaking and public speaking mentorship. So this is not a very traditional pathway for many of us, including myself, who is in that Asian male bracket. So Jose, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me on. This is really cool. I remember seeing your profile, like, I don't know, what it's 6 months ago, maybe end of last year. I'm like, who's this Asian coach? I'm gonna follow him and slide into his DMs, reply to his stories. And then turns out we had mutual friends. And the next thing you know, we're playing ping pong together.
Yeah, crazy, crazy. It just all happened in the space of maybe from talking to each other initially, then moving on to, holy shit, we have a mutual friend, to meeting up. That whole process took at best 2, 3 weeks, and then it just happened.
Was it 2, 3 weeks?
Well, no, when we first started talking, that was months ago. But it was
Okay, yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
us realizing that, wait, we have a mutual friend. And when I went to that table tennis meetup, I didn't know you were coming.
I didn't know you were gonna be there either.
Yeah,
You
and
just told me
then
come play table tennis. I'll smoke you all.
yeah, because there was that Facebook group, and then I thought, hey, wait a minute, that's Jose, the guy who I've been speaking to on Instagram.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was
Funny how
mad.
things work in the world, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So, dude, I really wanted to just get to know you a bit, and for the audience to see what you're about, man, because you've got quite an interesting career path. And I won't dive into just one of them. I wanted to just get with how you even got into the arts as a career.
Uh-huh. Um, we'll start there, bro. Beautiful. I had a really my life now might not be traditional in terms of an Asian Australian male, but I definitely grew up in a traditional Asian household doing all the things like studied really hard, went to uni. I was a cadet, if you know what that is, like a accountant, straight out of high school and uni for 3 years. I worked in sales, and then once I worked in tech sales, I was sort of just like, I finished uni, I've got all this time. Why don't I try this acting thing that I've been telling myself I want to do since I was a kid? Um, and I went to my first acting class and just fell in love with it, man. It was just so invigorating and so different to what I've experienced before in my life that I was just like, wow, what is this? I want to really dive deep into it. One, I felt like found I was pretty good at it. Two, I was really passionate about it. And three, I was just like, yep, the time's now. Like, there's no other time in my life where I feel like I can have a crack at this. I had a lot of other Asian men around me being like, bro, like you're young, just do it. Like I had one guy tell me, man, if I could go back in time and just play music and write songs and get paid like 50K to do it, he's like, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And I'd trade this high paying sales job for it. And I was just like, wow, okay, cool. So that's how I got into the arts, man. That's how I broke out of the mold. It sort of helped that my parents were getting divorced. So I was just like, fuck you guys, man. I did
The
everything you
system broke. The system broke.
Bro, the system broke. It was just like I did everything and tried my hardest to do everything you wanted. Like I didn't, like I felt like when I wanted to socialize more, you said no, study, and study was most important. And do this, and then even when I was working, we're putting money away for you to do this and that. And then it's like, ah, we're in this position, and I followed your plan this whole time. Cool. I'm gonna fucking do things how I want to do them. Oh, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah, bro.
All
I'm
right,
the
cool. Well, I'm
worst.
gonna
I swear all the
fucking.
time. So I have another company where I sell online courses for PTs, and I got feedback where 90% of it was the feedback. The course is amazing. I love what the content feels, a great presenter, blah, blah, blah. And then the final comment, I was very disappointed that Phil swore in many of his videos because this is so unprofessional. And I read it and
Well,
I thought, it is what it is.
fuck them, bro. If they're getting the results, man, fucking swears. That's what I think. Anyway,
Yeah, it is what it is.
Um, so yeah, that they were splitting up, and I was just like, cool, I'm gonna do things my way now, and I'm gonna try it my way because your way obviously hasn't got us to where you said we would be, and now here I am. So that really was a permission piece for me to be like, whatever.
I,
Um,
I'm just going to pause you there for a second because before we get into that, there's a few things that I just want to park. One, you said permission piece. I think that's a really beautiful way of saying what you're saying. And also about the invigoration of acting and how that made you feel a certain way. I want to dive into that as well. But before we get into all that, what did you mean by the Asian household upbringing?
What I've found, and this is from my experience, and this is also from a lot of my other Asian friends, is there's almost like a straight formula, no maths pun intended, to like
Yeah.
immigrant Asian Australian upbringing, where you think about, you were born here, right?
Yeah.
Your parents migrated from overseas,
Yeah.
and so there's that formula where most of them came from some sort of poverty, and they knew that education was the way to get out of poverty, and they bring that programming from whatever country they're from into this first world country, Australia, where it's a completely different ball game, and you're you live in this Asian household where like it's very important to work hard. It's very important to study hard. Study and education and not even education, academics is the utmost importance. There's a lot of things about family, familial expectations about what career path you choose. Like doctor, engineer, lawyer. For me, I was like, I'm going to be accountant to just sort of feel like I could stay respected in the family and to have some sort of like level of self-worth, and that level of like traditional sort of things like sports I felt like wasn't really encouraged. Just socializing and going to parties or going to social gatherings, having your friends over wasn't really that encouraged unless they were Asian or family friends. um Playing music, like I know so many of my Asian actor friends, they're like, man, I got forced to play piano till like grade 8, which is
Me too.
like elite
That was
level
me.
piano.
That was me. Yeah, that was
do
me.
do you still play piano now?
No.
Do you know how crazy that is?
Why?
To get to grade 8 piano, like
Oh,
how good you have to be to play piano. Such a beautiful instrument. And people are like, oh, I didn't play anymore because, and I'm not speaking for yourself, but other of my friends are like, I was forced to. And that's why I didn't really feel the love of it, you know? And I was just like, wow.
I can relate to
Like,
that. Never loved
like
it ever.
squad swimming, kumon, like these are all just Asian traits of just like our parents being like, well, if they get a really, really good uh school marks, they're going to get a really, really good job. They're going to have a lot of money, and therefore they will be happy. And I have done my thing of coming, my mission of coming from poverty to now security
Hmm.
in this first world country.
Hmm.
The difference is that this is a different ball game, and that there's the way I see it is just like if you came to this country with this land of opportunity, and the opportunity is like to the skies, like why are you just going for here? You know what I mean? If the potential is out here. And me being like, I want to be an actor is me being like, my potential can be up here, but like me staying as accountant is just here.
Do you feel like the like I'm just reversing the script here for saying an actor, for example,
Mm.
who sees accounting to be upper job here and acting to be down here. You know what I mean? I'm just flipping the perception.
Yeah.
How would you talk to, say, the actor who believes the accounting is of a higher stature or potentially more of a better job than being an actor?
The in the question I don't see better or worse in terms of like how an actor perceives an accountant or account perceives an actor. I'm all about it's about the individual.
Mm.
Is the individual, were they put on this earth to be the best accountant in the world, and therefore they should be the accountant? And do they really love accounting? Does accounting light them up and make them passionate and make them want to go to work and really succeed and strive? Then they should be an accountant. But if they're an actor or if they're a creative or an artist, then like why would they want to be an actor, and why are we forcing people to be actors? And I don't see a better or worse in that sort of framework. I'm all about.
So I was just trying to gauge what you're saying is it's the person's innate drive and passion for something that elicits their potential. It's not necessarily grading what one thing is better than the other. It's more like
No,
what
not
they're
at all.
suited for.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
Um,
felt like when you went to that acting class, is that when you felt like that was far more suited for you?
Man, I remember doing drama in like year 6, and I just loved it. Loved it. Like I just couldn't wait for drama class every week. And then I just suppressed it for like, I don't know, what was that 10 years, 12 years? And I just would think about it, then like not do anything. Think about it, not do anything. And it was when I went to Europe and traveled for the first time. That was also another thing to be like, nope, I'm gonna do this now. You can't tell me I'm not going to Europe. Was when I was like just really drunk on this boat in Croatia. I just had this epiphany, just like staring at the stars. I was just like, what am I doing with my life? Like, do I want to do this? Do I want to work this a 9 to 5? I was like 22 at the time, and then at that moment, I was like, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna just see what it's like. And then I got to the acting class, and I just saw this complete different world. I was almost like a goldfish that's been taken out of their pond and put in an ocean, and you're just like, oh my God, this is out here. Like the energy in the room, watching these two people just go at it in this scene, I was just like, man, like, you ever had that feeling? Something inside you just feels like it just lights up, or like there's this feeling inside you, you feel called to something.
Yeah,
That's sort of what I felt.
yeah, yeah. When I discovered weightlifting. Oh, actually,
Mm,
before that, it was actually combat.
combat, your
Yeah,
first martial arts, or
yeah, mixed martial arts, my first one. Then I got
ooh,
bashed too hard, and
in
then
training?
I got a headache, and I realized I was concussed, so I left for 6 years. It was poor management from the gym owners. Like they should
Yeah.
never have put me into the ring with the guy I sparred, and the guy I sparred was a dickhead because
Was he
clearly
way
I
better
was
than you?
getting bashed. Yeah, clearly he was one of the fighters, and clearly I was taking shots that I should not have been taking, and they were too
Yeah.
hard as well. And then what happens is I went to weightlifting because I didn't like getting punched in the head like that.
Yeah.
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 No, but
But
I
now
know
you
what
do,
you
right?
mean. Huh?
You're back into Muay Thai now, right?
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
now I have actually skills. Back then I just had a jab. I
Yeah,
couldn't even
right?
kick properly. I'd
Man.
barely been training for a month.
And they put you into sparring with someone.
Yeah, yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah,
That's
dumb.
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 That's
Yeah,
dumb.
yeah. But anyway, like I understand what you mean when you felt that energy, that passion. So take me back to that class. Take me back to like what did you see and what did you feel?
I saw it was a very basic exercise now I think back of it, but it was two people really like with so much ferocity, so much passion, so much heart, just like fighting it out in this scene. Like this person was like, I need this from you, rah, rah, rah. And this other person was like, no, I need this. And they're just having this big dramatic scene. And what I felt was almost like, oh my God, you can do that. What would it feel like to do that? And it was almost like my heart was pulling me closer to be like, go on stage and start figuring out and start to understand or feel this feeling that they're feeling. And then it was when I started practicing and rehearsing and I got through the levels of the class that when you get on stage and you just hit that flow state, you know what surfers talk about being like, man, I'm just one with the wave. And you get in this level where you're just so free and your body's moving and you're speaking and it's like something takes over you and you're in just this state of bliss in the moment with this other person and just so present. That was the feeling that I had never felt ever in my life. Like you just feel so alive. Like some of the best scenes I love doing are those big, like fuck you scenes and like big breakup scenes on stage because there's just so much energy happening between this person and it's just like a big dance. And you probably feel the same feeling even with fighting. Like you're just nothing else in the world matters, nothing else exists except this other person that I'm on stage with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just felt so alive. And I just didn't know, I don't even know how to explain it now, but oh man, it's so you should try it. If you
I
haven't
have.
tried it, man, you should try it.
I
Acting?
have. Yeah.
Tell me about it. How'd you find it?
Oh, I think the place I went to was a bit
Where'd you go? Don't have to name
uh
names. Send me a name in the chat.
yeah, yeah. I went to hold on.
You don't want
Wait,
to put
wait,
them on
wait.
blast.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they were nice people.
Okay.
Uh oh man, I don't even remember their name.
Location? Oh, oh,
Uh
was it on? Oh, was it a class?
It was a class. It was like one of those, I think it was
Okay.
one of those like hobby things. People who just
Okay.
want to try it out, have fun, and then so I mean, I tried it and I did it because I wanted to experience something different because at this point I had already fought in kickboxing, I think. I had already competed internationally. I'd done public speaking. I thought to myself, man, like I'm always doing things that are scary, but they're all in that health field.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, I think it's time I just try something different. And I had a few options. I thought there's acting, there's singing, there's stand-up comedy. Let me just try one of those. And then I had a couple of
Mm,
friends who also were on the same wavelength and they said, hey, let's go try acting. That was it.
uh-huh.
That was it.
Interesting. How many classes did you do? Or what
I
was that
did I did
involved?
maybe altogether 4 or 5 months.
4 or 5 months.
Just once a week, yeah.
Okay.
And
Did
then at the end
what
you always
did
do a
you
showcase.
okay.
Yeah. Look, don't get me
Cool.
wrong, I
It
enjoyed it.
sounds like you didn't get much from it.
Look, let's just say that I don't remember I did it. When people
Wow.
ask me about it, then oh yeah, I did do it, but I can't say that it was one of those real memorable experiences because I'd already had so much more frightening, nerve-wracking situations, uh, competing internationally or doing what I did public speaking. I feel like those were way more nerve-wracking than performing on stage.
Okay. Interesting.
That's what I felt. But I
Yeah.
do understand the flow state, what you're talking about. I had that when I was on stage.
Mm.
But at the same time, my own perspective was you go in there, you play pretend. If you fuck up, you fuck up. No one dies, no one gets hurt. Whereas when I was public speaking, if I had to speak to a
Oh,
crowd of people who were listening to me for health advice, if I mess up and I give you the wrong shit, I'm scared you're gonna go home after your surgery and fuck up the surgery. So I gotta be on board on that one. If I'm competing, I only got one lift. I've trained too hard for this. You know, stakes are much higher. But in
wow.
acting on that context, I'm not getting paid
Yeah.
for this. If I do a bad performance, no one's gonna remember in 2 days. I don't care. So
Interesting.
yeah, that was me.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. Fuck yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that was
fucking
me.
really cool, man. How long ago was this?
Oh, a few years, man. Before COVID. Or maybe
Wow.
after COVID. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah,
I
but that
always
was
had
my
this
experience.
I always had this perspective that like so like there's been different iterations of my coaching, my business, and I'm gonna start an acting improv group for the people up here in the Gold Coast. All white people, mind you. I'm the token Asian up here. Um and I'm always like, would people in Sydney and Asian people be open to acting and having a similar experience to what I had and a healing experience to what I had through my acting journey? And it's interesting to hear you be like, oh yeah, I tried it. I did it. I'm like, wow, there are people out there that want to do it.
Oh, there's plenty, dude. There's
Mm,
plenty. Even in my class alone, there were 2 or 3 Asians.
man,
Yeah, I think
wow.
there's a huge curiosity in the arts for the Asian demographic because I mean most Asians don't
Why do
develop
you think
that
that
side,
is?
or because most of us don't
Mm,
really develop that side for the right reasons. I
mm.
mean, you could probably argue that I had arts experience playing the piano for 10 years, but I never did it for the art.
Why'd
I
you do
did
it?
it because my parents told me to. That's why, bro. Like
Yeah,
let's be real.
yeah,
Most people who did the arts, like they don't do it because I love the way the music sounds and the way the notes come together. It makes me euphoric. That's not what you do it. You do it because if you don't, your mom's gonna tell you off and guilt trip you for the next week.
fuck.
Yeah,
That's so true, right? Did you
yeah.
ever do any composition or like creating music or anything, or was it just like learning pieces and just learning and just practice, 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 practice,
Oh no,
practice?
I can improv on a piano. Like
Okay,
I can
okay,
just make tunes. I can just come up with shit on the spot. But I can't remember them. I can just improv on the spot. And it's
yeah,
great for if I record something and send it to my girlfriend. Babe, I made this for you.
yeah.
And she'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah, yeah. But I'm like, I can only do it once because I don't remember it. It just comes from playing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fuck,
yeah.
that's awesome, man. Piano is like something. my mate gave me his keyboard a few years ago, and he gave me one lesson. Piano is something where it's just like it's such the basis of music, and like any creation from there, like guitar or singing. Like if you have strong foundations in piano and understanding musical theory, like you can go a long way in whatever else you want to do in music.
Well,
That's
that's
something that
what,
I wish I'd did.
yeah, that's what my musician hobby friends actually tell me. They go, "Can you read sheet music?" And I say, "Yeah, I can read anything. You tell me what you want me to read, I'll tell you what that is right away." And they're like, "Do you know how useful that is?" I go, "No." I only know because I was forced to know. It's like, I don't care. I walk past, they're trying to figure out a note. I just walk past and go, "That's an E. Yeah, E here on the keyboard." Like, how did you do it so quickly? Like, it's because in the exam, they give you a paper, they tell you to sight read with both hands on your first try. And if you fuck it up, you get a B. So you get really good at just
You
put
can't
something
get
in
it, and
front of
you
me.
can't get a B. You can't get a B in an Asian household.
No, you can't. You can't. Well, I got a C once though, bro. That was bad.
Did
That was bad. That was bad. Yeah. Anyway,
you go to a selective school?
and I did Sefton High.
Damn,
Yeah, but
damn, man.
I was not selected right away. I was community first. So
Um,
for the first few years of my life, I never knew that testing meant you had to try and study. I thought you just turn up
oh,
and circle some shit,
yeah.
and that's what I did. And I didn't get very good marks. And then in school, they would test me, but they would just ask me questions like verbally or during the class, and I would get all of them. And they looked at me and they'd say, "Why are you in this class?" I go, "Oh no, I don't test well." And they go, "I think you shouldn't be here." And eventually they moved me up to selective because essentially I was just sandbagging all my tests.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's like a young thing, and that was me. My young days were just, what do you want me to do? Like that was me back in the day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
At what? Oh, I know. I have a question for you before. I know you're meant to be asking the questions.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
uh,
I wanted to ask something, but yeah, go on. I can see you're
at
really
what
curious.
point? Because it sounds like your life was sort of like, oh, no, I'm just doing things because I'm told, and I'm doing piano because I'm told, and I'm here. At what point were you like, oh, I want to do this?
Ooh, similar to you, maybe 21 or 22.
Mm,
It was in line with my athletic pursuit.
nice.
Yeah, that
Were your
was
parents
one.
supportive of it?
Uh like not really. Not until I told them after 4 or 5 years in that I was basically the best in the country, almost.
Yeah,
And I said, well, there's only one thing left to do, which is to get my spot.
yeah.
And that's when they were like, "Oh, you serious?"
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I ask is back in my acting classes, I noticed this trend where, in acting, you have like a want, right? Or like, this is what I want from this other person. And after the scene, you get sit down and you get asked these questions, and it's sort of like therapy. And the teacher would ask these people, these students, like, well, what do you want? And it was always the Asian acting students that were just like, they were never able to truly answer the question on a deep level in their own hearts what they wanted for themselves. All the white kids and all the things like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to work with this director. I want to do this. I want this for my life. I want this. It was all the Asians that were sort of like water it down and be like, oh, I sort of want this and I want to work with like good writers. And then the teacher had to be like, what do you want? Like, own what you want. And I feel like growing up in Asian households, we weren't really given that opportunity to be like, well, what do you want to do in your life? It was just, here's the formula, fit into it.
Yeah. Or even if you did, you were shut down. Yeah. I think we can
Mm.
go into that a little bit. But before we go into that part, I wanted to ask you about something you said, the healing effect of acting for you. The healing effect. What do you mean by that?
How do I explain this concisely?
You don't have to be concise, bro.
And this is an interesting part because I was going to comment on what you were saying about your acting experience. Well, you were like, okay, you go up on stage, you play pretend, and if it's bad, whatever. If it's good, whatever. The way I was trained and the acting that we did was like there's no pretend. Like you train your mind, you train your body, you train your spirit to like when this person leaves the room, an example would be like they are committing suicide and you have to truly commit to your body, to your mind, to having that emotional, psychological, physiological response to this person has now just died. So when you're acting, it's like it's not I'm putting a character on and playing pretend. The way I saw it was I'm actually revealing deep parts of myself that I never get to in everyday life, like the arguments, the fights, the breakups, the heartbreak, the betrayal. Those are things that if you truly, truly, truly want to play this character and serve this story to what the writer intended on a deep soul level, there's parts of you that you need to explore. And for me, those parts weren't explored and hadn't been brought to light. And so in that, I remember sitting on the couch after scenes and it's the teacher's just asking questions and it's literally like therapeutic because there's the point where it's just like, how come you struggle on this one line? How come you're really struggling to be violent here? And doing this self-exploration to be like, oh wow, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to play. It's hard for me to be violent because I don't want to become my dad. And I need to expose that part of myself and bring it to light and really own it to truly play this character. Or dealing with like parts where it's like, oh, how come this scene really triggers you? Oh, it's because it reminds me of my friend who passed away when I was 18 that I have a lot of guilt for. Therefore, when I play this scene and play this character, it reminds me a lot of my friend. And I can either shy away from it or I can be like, this is the source of energy that I'm going to use for this scene, for this character. And that's what makes it so beautiful. In that, it's healing.
Right. So your approach to acting in your acting school was, we're not pretending up here. We're showing a version of ourselves that is real in context to the part that you're playing.
Yeah, literally.
Okay.
And that's what I think 99% of what like the top actors would be doing. Like Meryl Streep, for example, would be like, if it's a really, really deep scene, she's like, I'm doing this scene once and once only, and everyone on this set better get it and get it right. Because I'm not doing it again because she's going to such a deep part within herself where it costs her emotionally and it's so painful for her to do it to the level that the director wants at that level.
Okay. So my question to that would be, if you know yourself in real life and you've encountered shit in real life and you know what happened to you in real life, right? And you face a similar situation in an acting context and you bring that part of yourself into the scene, but that part you brought doesn't suit what the director wants or what the teacher wants. At what point then is that still real when it is real? Say, for example, I have to express my heartbreak, right? In a scene. I've had my heart broken. I know how I expressed it when it happened to me in real life. But then for the sake of the drama, the way I expressed it may not be strong enough to the teacher or the director's liking. How do you then describe that as which one is real and which one is acting? Because the real one was not good enough for the scene.
The real one that may not be good enough for the scene was real in that instance with that person in that time in that circumstance. What we do as actors is we live truthfully in imaginary circumstances. And so this other person in this scene that is breaking up with me might be completely different. The relationship might be different. The circumstances might be different. And what we would do, or how I would do as an actor, is I'd take an essence from what happened to me in real life and just sprinkle it into whatever circumstance this is. And in that, it's a creation of something. It's not about, hey, this is real, and then if I put it in here, that's all I've got. There's still a level of, and I use a combination of real experience and imagination. Like we could improv a breakup right now. I don't know how it's gonna go,
Mm,
but that doesn't mean it might not be real because we're depending on the parameters of the story and what's happened and the whatever it is, like it'll be real in this moment, or as
mm,
real as you can get in an acting scenario.
right. Right. Do you ever feel there's a disconnect between, say, when you're really deep in acting and then you get to real life and you're like, hold on a minute, do I feel like I'm being myself or am I acting? Like, does it ever blur?
Yeah, yeah, bro. Like there's two things that's coming to mind is you train in acting your impulse. So if someone like pisses you off, you train your body to have that reaction where you fucking really give it to them, right? And there were times when I was first acting where like my brother would piss me off, and because I've just conditioned my body and I've just been rehearsing for 4 hours, I'd have that sort of reaction, and that blur started to happen between real life and acting. And at the same time, I'd see people's identities get so caught up in being an actor that they actually stop being a human being, and that in their real life they were performing on stage with the same actor mannerisms which aren't even real. Like when people move their hands like this and like they talk like that, like no one ever talks like that. It's just very theatre read. And people do it so much on stage that they then just bring that into their natural life. You'll notice, and you'll see if you look at different actors, they change over time depending on the roles that they do. Like Austin Butler, for example, like his voice has changed from playing Elvis. And there's almost that blur between the Austin Butler as me and as himself and Austin Butler as Elvis. Start to blur and we get closer and closer. It's super interesting. So I find it super fascinating.
Well, I find it really fascinating
Mm.
because how do you even get out of that? If like you yourself, how did you realize, shit, I'm taking this acting thing into my life now and I don't think it's serving me.
Awareness,
Yeah.
having a self-awareness and grounding yourself and it took a while to realize for me, probably my last few years in acting school where I was just like, oh, and it's when we would have to play characters with like severe like mental conditions. So like multiple personality disorder, psychopaths, sociopaths. And you would train your mind to have that, and you needed to learn how to have like an on and off switch where it's just like, okay, cool. For me, like I just need to watch some sitcoms for like 10 minutes and just laugh and relax and sit down. And I'm like, okay, I'm back. Cool.
What's the darkest place you've ever gone to for your acting roles?
Um, the darkest or most painful? Darkest?
Whichever one where you were the most concerned for yourself.
Multiple personality disorder or syndrome or dissociative identity disorder, where I spent like weeks and weeks researching, watching vlogs from people who had the condition, creating all these different characters in my mind and going to deep, dark places where like as a psychopath, trigger warning, I would, or as even like as a schizophrenic, I'd listen to like YouTube videos of like what it would be like to have schizophrenia and having like voices in your head and this and then like just imagining the character I created was quite psychotic and imagining people like just as I'm walking down the street how I would kill them or and some of my best friends I'm acting like this is the story that we created and I killed you and I did this and I really fucked up shit like really fucked up shit even like the stakes that you create, where it's just like, I need to save my mum or else she'll be sex trafficked. And really, as an actor, buying into that and committing to that is like, it just opens the depths of like your nervous system and it's crazy. Like, so intense. And that's why they're like, the great acting teachers are just like, actors should be in therapy to make sure that they're not touching parts that aren't safe or not ready. Oh my God. Oh, there's one exercise that comes to mind where the exercise was about emotional preparation, how to teach yourself how to be like, when the director says you need to be at this high emotional level, you can do it, right? And I walk in through the door and I'm having this experience that my best friend has just died, right? But the story was so close to my real best friend dying when I was 18 and I hadn't properly dealt with it. I remember crying and crying and crying, and the teacher goes, "Okay, stop, we're fine." And I couldn't get out of it. And I'm just crying and crying and crying, and just like it was scary. And I felt it for like the next 2 days. We're just like, oh, and my teacher just told me like, don't ever explore that again. Don't ever go there again because it's not ready for you to explore. It's not healed within you yet. And I was like, ah, oh, fuck, cool. Yep. Want to do that again. I don't know if you call it like a mental breakdown or whatever it was, but it was just intense. Like I just lost control of my mind, lost control of my emotions. Like, when you just can't stop crying. It took like 10 minutes of my mate just like calming me down where I just couldn't, just hysterically, just like screaming, crying.
Wow. I can't say I've ever had that, but I would say that maybe I had one anxiety attack or panic attack in my life. That was
Mm,
uncontrollable. It just felt like my skin was crawling underneath, like real,
mm.
real strong heart beating, but no crying. But it was a maniac type experience for me because I was between crying and laughing. I would laugh for
Interesting.
a bit and then I would cry for a bit. I would laugh for a bit and then I would cry for a bit.
Do you mind me asking what happened or what took place for you to have that emotional response?
No, not at all. I wrote about it and it
Hmm.
was very interesting because the people who read it were like, "That's fucking sick," but it wasn't sick for me going through it. Um, Long story short, I had a very bad breakup, and the girl I was seeing was living in Thailand. I came home. I was meant to spend months in Thailand with her, but it didn't work out. So I came home, spent a few months here healing, whatever. And then I decided that I wanted to continue my travel overseas. So I put myself in Malaysia. And it was a combination of a long flight, sleep deprivation. When I arrived at my hostel, my guest house, there was about 10 hours before I could actually sleep. So more sleep deprivation. And so I get into my room and suddenly all the smells of Asia, the sounds of Asia, everything that reminded me of that situation, it hit me all at once. And so I'm pretty good with my nerves. I'm actually very good with my nerves. So I could start to feel something come on, and I'm lying in bed thinking, "Oh yeah, I can do this." So I just lay there. I sat with it. I breathed. I did all the normal stuff. But after 10 minutes, it still wasn't happening. My heart was going crazy. My body felt like it was on fire. Didn't have any problems breathing. I also knew that I'd be completely okay. It was just very uncomfortable. So eventually I said, okay, maybe I should start crying. Tried to cry, didn't work, not a big crier. So I opened this YouTube video and it's Jackie Chan doing his Golden Globe speech. And this video gets me all the time because Jackie has all his stunt team behind him and he's got 30 years of the JC stunt team and he doesn't know they're behind him and they're remembering what's going on. And then he turns around and then the soppy music comes on and they're all like, Jackie Chan, big brother. And he starts crying. And that moment always gets me. So I start crying, like tears start coming. I go, yes, now we can process. So I start crying a bit. And as I'm crying, I'm laughing because I just used Jackie Chan to make myself cry. So I'm crying for about maybe 2, 3 minutes, not sobbing or anything, but just tears. And I'm kind of moving a bit. Then after that, I start laughing hysterically for maybe another 2, 3 minutes. Then I start crying again, laughing again. And I just bounced back and forth for maybe 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought like I'm like that Joker guy from Joker. He's laughing, he's crying. He's laughing, he's crying. I went through all of that 30 minutes and afterwards I was fine and I had a nap.
Wow. It's really interesting how like the body expresses emotion, or
Mm,
I believe energy and motion. Like, and the reason I asked was when I was a kid, you remind me of this memory where like my dad would leave to go overseas for like months at a time. And there was one time where like he left and I was a kid and I remember just something like at my aunt's house, just like we were in this, yeah, crying. but then I just start laughing. And I reckon that it was at that point that I started using humor as a defense mechanism. And I just started laughing and crying and laughing and crying. And I was laughing uncontrollably. I'm like, I don't know why I'm laughing. And there's tears pouring down my face. It was so crazy.
What do
So
you
crazy.
think? What do you think about that? Humor as a defense mechanism, because I think this transitions nicely into men in general, why they use humor so much.
For me, I have fond memories in primary school where like people would laugh. I remember saying something, people would laugh, and it clicked. I'm like, oh, I think people think I'm funny. And then I kept leaning into it and leaning into it. And then I was just naturally just becoming more and more expressive. And I was naturally quite funny. And I used it as a way to self-soothe myself from like the darkest painful memories and painful times that I had in my household. Like my parents split up. Like it was quite a um emotional roller coaster being at home, like always being on eggshells. And then laughing and like fun and joy was like my escape. And so I used it a lot to process not to process, to like almost soothe my emotions as I grew up. And so whenever tension came up or whatever, like a difficult conversation or like a difficult situation would happen, I'd always be the one to like make a joke to break the tension, to make everyone feel calm and make everyone feel okay, you know? And of course myself feel okay.
When did you realize that this wasn't serving you?
During acting.
Could you elaborate on that?
I remember my teacher at the time calling it out, saying like, Jose, you know, you don't have to be the funniest person in the room all the time. And then I pondered like, what do you mean? Like everyone loves funny Jose. And then I realized it was actually preventing me from processing deeper emotions. It was also preventing me from being my fullest authentic self in being able to hold tension with people, whether it was like a tense conversation with women or in sales or in business or whatever it was, learning and being like, oh, my default is to always make a joke, and therefore I can't apply pressure to people, or I can't do this or that. And I became almost like really one note on the piano and realizing, oh, there's all these other notes that I need to learn how to play. Um, and that was when I really started exploring like my masculine journey and understanding what that looked like. And yeah, it was really interesting. I think it was like a breakup that started being like, oh, the idea that like, oh, funny Jose isn't enough. What else is out there?
It's
And then I came back,
so
and then I came back full circle, being like, oh, wait, Jose is enough, but there's just interference, and if he was just himself and whatever it was, and got rid of all the bullshit, he just is enough as is, you know.
like you say, it's all about being authentic to yourself, especially in that moment. If you don't want to be funny, sometimes you force yourself to be funny. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that does yourself a disservice. It's
Yeah,
so
because I'm watering
interesting.
myself down.
Yeah, yeah, that's well, it's really interesting you say that because I have had similar conversations with some of the guys that I've coached. And the context is in dating, in dating. And I told a few guys, hey, if you don't want to be funny with this chick, you don't feel like you can be funny right now, don't try to be funny. Like just if it means nothing's gonna be said, don't say anything. Just it's okay. Like it's okay. Just if you want to be quiet in this moment because you can't be fuck talking, don't talk. It's all right. And these guys are like, but like, what about making the chick laugh and doing all these things? I said, dude, I know what you're saying, but honestly, I think they're going to be more attracted to you if you just appear really grounded. And it works. It absolutely works.
Because they're the joking. There's a difference. Like I'm still funny as fuck. Like I still claim to be the funniest person in the Gold Coast. But there's a difference
Sample size is
between
one.
yeah.
Sample size is one.
um, there's a difference between making a joke coming from a place of, oh, I feel insecure, I feel like I need to make her laugh to add some sort of value because I don't feel like I'm enough. And whether the joke's funny or not, whether they laugh, I can feel that energy of like, oh, he's compensating here, or he doesn't feel like he's enough, or doesn't feel valuable compared to like, oh, right now I really feel like making a joke because I'm secure in myself and I think this is really funny. And if you don't think it's funny, that's fucking, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a paradox where, and I find it, I don't know if you find it maybe in business, but I found it within auditioning. There's a paradox between, okay, I really want this person to like me, like a casting director or a director. But the paradox is if I try and get them to like me and I become likable, they actually won't like me.
Yep. Yeah. No, I completely understand what you're saying. It's there's a phrase in, I believe it's a Tao, but it's in ancient wisdom, basically, which is you always want to attract, you never want to chase, essentially. And you attract mainly by being the best version of yourself, which doesn't include pandering to other people. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
man.
understand. I understand what you're
Took me
saying.
a long time to learn that lesson, man. Probably still learning it very much now, man.
Do you think what you just said was getting a lot of like exposure during your acting journey? Like you realize that as you were acting, you were trying to get people to like you instead of owning who you were?
Yeah, bro. Oh man, dude. My ego with the idea of like, bro, like if you don't there would be a level of me not feeling like I was enough in 2017 and the idea of like, well, if I just get rich and famous and become an actor and I seem to be pretty good at this acting thing, hopefully people will love me or maybe I'll get my dad's approval or whatever it is, you know? And so yeah, I definitely thought the exposure of acting, this and that would soothe that part in me, but it took a long time to learn that. Was that your question? What was your question again?
How did acting, exposing yourself to acting, make you realize that this was what you were doing, like trying to get people to like you?
Yep. I thought, and then man, it was interesting because like in different environments, like if you're the best actor, people respect you for it. Or if you have the biggest agent, people respect you for it, and your ego gets it. But then it's all fake. It's all facade. It's not real. It's not deep. They'll just love you for this idea of you, but not for who you truly are.
So when you hear the phrase, oh, Jose is a great actor, how does it make you feel now?
Proud in myself for what I've worked for and what I've overcome and what I've worked through, but not a sense of like, oh, I'm better than people now, which is what it would have been at least a few years ago
Right. Okay.
from an
So
ego
that,
perspective, you know?
yeah.
Because now my sense of self-worth, or sense of self-love doesn't come from that place of Jose is a good actor, therefore he deserves love, or therefore he's enough.
Where does it come from now?
How to explain this? It does actually. Here's what it is. It doesn't come from anywhere. It just is. Like Jose is enough. Full stop.
There's no because.
No, because if there's a because, there's a condition, and as soon as that condition isn't met, therefore, then you won't be enough. There's definitely human elements to it, or 3D elements of like, well, also easier said than done to be like Jose is enough because there's still all these other things that I want in my life to be like, well, I want to make more money, I want to do this, I want to have a family, I want to be a protector provider, I want to whatever it is. And potentially in those roles of like Jose is a father, Jose is a partner, Jose is a coach, Jose is an actor, whatever it is, may not be enough or whatever it is, but they're just extensions of Jose, not Jose at his core on a deep soul level, on a spiritual level, you know?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Mm.
I think it goes back to a lot of the deep religions all go back to that as well.
Yeah.
As you're part of depending on which religion you want to be for. You're made in God's image and God is great. Therefore, we don't question that God is great. Therefore, don't question yourself. You are also a child of God.
Fuck, I love that. That's fucking really good.
Christians,
Man.
I mean, I learned that from the Christians, but it also exists across other timelines, cross-culturally. Like the Egyptians had it, the Chinese had it. They all talk about coming from this one source, the creator. Not necessarily the Christian God, but it probably is. They're all talking about the same thing, but none of them are able to encapsulate how beautiful it really is. And we are all part of that as a soul level.
That's what I definitely subscribe to on a spiritual belief sense. Yeah, to your point, it's like we're trying to use three-dimensional words to explain the greatness and idea of what God or source of the universe or all that is, you know, like the English language is only so limited, you know?
As are our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. we can't comprehend it at all.
Dude, there's this one saying I love. Like if you imagine a pie chart, right? Imagine one little slice is like, this is the things that you know. And here's another little sliver. Here are the things that you don't know. Like I know I don't know heaps about fucking rocket science or whatever it is, right? But then the rest of this pie is like all the things that you don't even know that you don't even know. You know?
And I would do an extension on that, which is you don't even know that what you don't know exists beyond this pie. Like this pie is just what you think. It's just a conceptually in your mind what makes sense. But there is something beyond this pie that you can't put it on paper that you can't know.
Dude, you ever try to explain this to like an NPC kind of person?
Yeah, I'm actually quite successful at it.
Really?
Yeah, because I think one of my gifts is I can see things very clearly and I can explain them very clearly. And it's very simple, it's very concise for me. So I can do it. But what you usually get afterwards is oh my God, what am I supposed to do with this information? You know, you tell them and they're like, I get it, but like what now?
You leave it in error 404, they're just like
Yeah. It's like repeat, restart.
Yeah.
So with your acting, right? I mean, I want to move on to the other stuff you're doing as well. How does the stuff you've learned as an actor translate over to the current life that you have built for yourself? Like, how does acting skill work in daily life?
One, I have a deep level of trained level of empathy now where I'm so sensitive. Like if I'm speaking to someone, I can sense what they may be going through, an emotion they're going through, just from the sensitivity that you train as an actor, just being opposite someone. I've developed a really deep sense of like emotional intelligence and being able to just communicate with people and read people really well is another big skill of acting and learning how to listen and receive all the inputs that are given to you. One thing that really came about that I realized I did just a fun improv class with my friend up here on the Gold Coast on Monday, and there's a few people there that hadn't improv before, and I just realized like this gift that I have to be able to just think on the fly and just improvise and just create from absolute nothing without knowing all these different things that need to happen at different points in time and have it structured and prepared and just be able to go, whoosh, this is what it is with no fear, no attachment to any results. I've found that's been really beneficial to me in meetings, in business, in sales. Dude, being able to acting is so good for sales, not because you can sell better because you can talk better, but because you learn how to listen better, because you learn how to ask better questions. When you start to ask questions of character, you start to ask questions about psychology, and therefore you're asking questions about like any human that might be able to interact with you. There are three big ones that come to mind straight away.
It sounds like essential human to human skills. You know, it's human to human.
My teacher used to say this thing, being like, yeah, you come here to act, but really what you're actually learning about is life. And I've seen so many people, like these young guys that are teenagers with like not much confidence, walk around women, just learn about themselves and learn about life through acting and playing different characters. The next thing you know, like they've got girlfriends, they're out there thriving, they're confident. Like it's just so interesting and fascinating to me. It's like, oh, you came because you thought you were here for some drama classes. No, 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 no. You're here for like deep study of life and philosophy and the human condition.
So they learn about who they are and who everyone else is as well.
Mm. Especially if you study great writing. Great writing from the great writers usually comments on the psychology of the people in that day and the problems they were going through. And usually they're still quite universal and still very prevalent in today's society.
Well, I remember there was a phrase that I listened to a long time ago. It was Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about how their stories, the stories that are very popular throughout time, centuries old stories, the reason why they're so long lasting is not because it's a great story. They're long lasting because they wrote you in the story, and you can see why you would be that. You would see why you could be that. You could see all of those things. And it got me thinking a lot about even like video games. When you play a character, there's games that consistently reproduce over and over again. Top 10, top 10. What they do really well is they always get that avatar and they're like, oh, wait, that's me. I could be that person. And that's that we talk about. That's the psychology. So when you're watching a movie, when you're playing a game, you're not watching a character, you're watching yourself.
You.
Yeah, you're watching yourself
Or else you
in
wouldn't
that.
watch it because it's not relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they watch yourself, not only you as an avatar, but you in somewhat similar experiences and trials and tribulations that you can then like emotionally latch onto and ride that wave and that roller coaster of what the story is, whether it's a movie, whether it's a film, whether it's a video game, bro. Like it's you identify with that person and you're like sick. Even in video games, it's like it takes it to another level where it's like it's not even like I'm watching something like a TV show. It's like, oh, I get to be this person.
Yep.
I get to run around and do these missions, and this makes me feel real, you know? And the achievements that this video game character has feels like my achievements.
So when you have to cap off this acting component, when you have a person or a friend who is thinking about getting into something like acting, right? They're like, oh, it looks fun. Maybe I could be on a TV show or something. What do you say to those guys? Is that the
The
right
first
reason to
thing,
pursue acting?
the first thing I ask them is why. Like, why do you want to do that? They're like, oh, I want to try acting. I'm like, why? And depending on their answer, I'll tell them different things and I'll give them different places to go to. If they're like, oh, I just want to do it for funsies and try this, I'm like, okay, cool, try this place. If they're like, oh, I want to do it because I heard like Tony Robbins say it was good for your healing, I'm like, go this place. If they're like, oh, I want to be an actor on a television show and movies and I want to be a serious actor, I'm like, cool. Are you ready for the work that's involved for it? Because what you're saying is that you want to be an Olympian level artist relative to the rest of the world. And are you ready to train like an Olympian and to learn like an Olympian and to be committed to it like an Olympian? It's like with anything, you know, like if you want to be great at something, you got to put the hours and you got to work your craft. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do this, I want to be this. I'm like, cool. And they're like, do you really think I need acting classes? I'm like, look, I know there's actors out there that didn't need classes, but like it's like 0.0001%. There's a craft there to be learned and there's exploration for you to have within yourself, you know? That's what I'd say.
Okay. How did you get into the public speaking stuff?
Public speaking.
Yeah.
I got into my wave went from acting, self-development, and spirituality into then public speaking. I public speak on, so I work for a company called the Quantum Academy. Our boss, CEO, director is Dr. Espin, who's do you know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is or Dr. DiMartini?
Heard the names, not familiar.
He's like an up and coming version of those two. Really, like they're huge in self development industry. Like Dr. DiMartini is like a god in the self development industry, and all the other coaches would have like derived from what he did. Probably even Tony Robbins. Um, I started off there, started doing self development work. A few years later, ended up working for them, and few years later, I got invited to speak on their stage, where I'd be speaking to like 200, 250 people on the regular. I'm actually speaking on stage this Sunday. I got to rewrite my speech. That's how I got into public speaking. And then I realized in that process, when I was helping other people do public speaking, I was like, oh, this is just like acting, like a monologue. And all the different hurdles that my friends and now clients experienced in public speaking, I was like, oh, this is just really simple monologue work. I have the tools to be able to work with this. And that's how it started. And that's another love where it's like I'm taking the skills I learned from acting and something else I'm really passionate about. And now it's finding another expression somewhere else.
What do you mean by monologue work and public speaking being very similar?
So imagine I asked you, hey, can you come do a 20-minute speech about your story? And I want you to focus on physical health and your journey with physical health and how it might help some of my people that you've been speaking to. The way you would do that speech would be very similar. And if you want it to be like emotionally captivating, would be very similar to how I did monologues, like just one person speeches, in terms of how you structure the story, in terms of how you, even just to go back to basics, man, just like how actors warm up is just how you best prepare your body. Sorry, can you hear that in the background?
No.
No, cool. How you prepare your body and how you prepare your mind for acting is just like optimal for how you prepare yourself to go on stage to speak. One thing I really teach is all about like nervous system. And like, let's say you're a new public speaker and you can work for hours and hours, rehearse. But as soon as you step on stage, all that rehearsal can go out the window because if your fight or flight or fall or freeze kicks in, you're done for. And those are other things that I learned along my journey through acting. So many different elements to it, like not even like pronunciation or that sort of stuff, like storytelling, how you stop and use your body to tell a story, how you pause, how you use your voice. These are all techniques that you learn in acting that you just now need to apply to like, oh, I'm playing a character named me and I'm telling a story that's just my own.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like if you remove acting, just remove that name of the craft, and you just take the skills that you learned. It, apart from the character work that is clearly from acting, everything else sounds like something you might learn if you were to do like a public speaking course. It sounds like even when you talked about central nervous system regulation, I talk about that with all my athletes. All right, guys, here's what's going to happen. You're going to feel like really either nervous, you want to run away, or you want to fight. Okay, that's going to happen. And I'm going to teach you what you need to do in that situation. Like this goes into performance psychology too. So it's like it all comes, a lot of it comes down to the one thing, which is how well can you manage yourself in the position that you're placed in.
Dude, it's so interesting, right? I've had several acting teachers talk about and use the same analogy for sports performance or performance coaching, which is like, man, 10 years of training comes down to this one race for this Olympian. If they can't manage their nerves and their central nervous system at that point in time, and they get to fight or flight, those 10 years can go out the window. Like your subconscious mind and central nervous system is so potent, so well designed to protect you that if you get into that fight or flight state to prevent yourself feeling those emotions or whatever it is, you're fucked. You're absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Part of what my one acting teacher, he specialized in auditioning because he was like, the hardest part that people think about acting is like getting on set. It's like, nah, it's booking the audition because you have like especially big auditions, like your entire life could change in a phone call. It takes one phone call for your life to change. And if you're so emotionally insecure or attached to this outcome, you're always going to get that fight or flight nervous system response, and you're never going to be able to act as well as you can if you were relaxed and if you didn't give a shit and you were able to have fun and to explore into that moment and hit that flow state. And so he just focused on like different neurological things of like things you can do. He was like, fuck deep breathing. Deep breathing's fucking too late for you if you're nervous in the audition room and you're looking at all these other people that you think are better than you, that look exactly like you going for the same role. There was so many different techniques that he used to help you calm yourself and just regulate yourself, you know? Such a big, important thing in life, man. You're on a big date. You gotta regulate yourself if you get nervous.
When you just mentioned something that I talk about a lot too with my athletes, which is you need to perform like you really care, but you also need to detach from it like you don't care, because you can only perform at your best when you're not focused on getting there, which is exactly what you
Yeah.
mentioned. So for
Paradox, right?
it's that paradox, yeah. So for you, when you're at an audition, how do you do that?
In-person audition or like doing a self-tape?
Whichever one's more impactful. You know, I feel like maybe if you're in person auditioning, that's the most impactful.
Yeah. In-person auditioning is like, I know I needed you get to a level where you know how much work you need to do. You read a script and you're like, okay, cool, I need to do X amount of hours or X amount of work or these specific exercises or tasks to prepare for this audition to get into this role. Then you rock up and you do the different things, like you make sure you get a good night's sleep, you make sure you don't drink too much coffee beforehand or coffee at all. You whatever you can do to relax leading up to it. If I need to do breath work, whatever it is, just to get my breath deep before I rock up into the audition room. One thing for me, like I like either listening to music or I like chatting to people and just like I am with you now, just like relaxed and just chilling. I don't like to like have this overly sort of thing, like tense preparation. And then they're like, Jose, we're ready for you. I'm like, okay, cool. Cool, how are you? Whatever it is, talk to the person who's there, talk to any of the actors that are there. What have you worked on? Whatever it is. Then when it's time to go in, it's like I've trained a switch in my mind. We're like, okay, we're on. And you like the relaxed version of Jose comes out. Um, and I just put all my attention onto the other person I'm acting with, or to the casting director, or whatever it is, and I take all the attention off myself. If I'm putting my attention off myself, I'm then worrying about or caring about what I'm doing, and I'm not fully in the scene. And I'm not fully listening to this other person. I'm not fully going back and forth in the stance. Takes a lot. Took practice. There's really big actors out there. They're like, man, I suck at auditioning. I'm so glad I got a big break early, and I'm off the roles because I suck at auditioning, because it's that part of managing that nervousness. And I almost imagine it, and my teacher always gave like a analogy of like a slingshot. It's like as soon as I walk through the door, I just let it all go, and it's just like we're there. I'm not looking back. I'm not caring about anything else. It's just we're here, we're there, we're flowing through every single punch, and you're just like, it'd be similar to like when you fought. Like you can't be thinking about your training and the combos that you practice beforehand
I,
in
I
the
think
middle of the fight while you're fighting.
I think you can't, because
You
fighting is
can't.
so fast that you don't have time to do that. If anything, I think weightlifting was more mind challenging, because when you're in a
Uh-huh.
fight, somebody throws a jab at you, if you your instincts will react whether you like it or not. So you don't
Mm.
really get time to think. Whereas in weightlifting, it's just you, and you control
Ah.
when you start. You control how hard you pull. You control everything. So when you talk about the attention, a lot of
Mm.
weightlifters actually perform way worse in competitions than they do if they did a CrossFit competition. Same
Because they
weights.
have, are you saying because they have, and it's interesting because you're like weightlifting, like it's just you. And I'm thinking like, where do you put your attention? Where do you put your mind? Where do you put your energy if it's not on yourself, but there is only yourself, you know?
Mm-hmm. For
What does that
me,
look like?
for me, it was I had a preset routine. So I knew what I was doing every lift. I had a pre-performance routine. And my mindset was always, I don't exist right now if there's no one here to watch. There's no one here to watch. There's no one here to compete. I don't exist, you know? So it's very similar to what you're saying. So when I went into it, I would just say, okay, I got my routine. I've trained hard enough. I'm going to put on a good show. That's all that matters. And that was it. And that always got me through it, because I also know that the more you think about it, the worse you get. So I always just went, the same thing when I talked about the acting on stage. Whatever it was, I thought, you know what? This is the best part, because you don't think about it. If you fuck up, you fuck up. But like you say, you don't care about it enough. And that's why you do really well, because you just don't care. And that's what I did. I thought, like, when I public speak, I don't know, this is not something I've learned from anyone. I just started doing it, which is, it's kind of like this. When I'm talking to someone, when I public speak, I always search for people in the crowd, and I look at them and I talk to them directly. And when they respond, I see them nod, I start playing with that interaction a lot more and a lot more. And it usually turns out to be a really, really good speech, because I don't go on with anything in my head. I'm just having a conversation with you.
Because you're present.
Yeah.
That's the big thing, how to get back to presence.
Yeah. So yeah, when you talked about the attention, I talked to, say, anybody who's going through a performance anxiety thing. I say, you know, if you put your attention on yourself, and you care about how you look, how you sound, how you might come across, depending on what you're doing, you're being incredibly self-absorbed. It's not about you right now, right? If you're doing a speech for, say, what I was doing, which is sometimes it was presenting information for an operation, it's not about you right now, dude. These people are going under the knife tomorrow. Don't care about how you sound and how good you are at speaking. Make sure you get all the information across, and these people get it. So you watch them. If they're nodding and understanding, you've done a good job. If you stutter, so what? Who cares? Just say the word again. You know, that's all it is. But the focus is on them. It's not on you.
Can we rewind a second? Were you a surgeon or like a doctor or like a...
No, I was a physio.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought you said you was physio. And I was just like, when you mentioned operations, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, so part of my job, my first job, was our physio clinic worked in conjunction with the surgery next door. And they hired us to do the pre-op, I suppose, education sessions. And so sometimes there'd be 10 people, sometimes there'd be 20 people. And I'd always have to present, like, this is what's going to happen. And it's high stakes, because if I say the wrong thing, these people are going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. It's what, 6 months of pain? What the fuck? That's what's going to happen. So it's not like I can just...
High stakes.
The wrong word in that context can really make things worse for these people, especially in health, you know? Whereas some other things, not so much. If I teach someone about performance psychology, I say the wrong word, I can go, oh, actually, never mind. Forget I said that. But if I say to a person who's having shoulder surgery, if I say something stupid, like some surgeries fail, something stupid like that, only thing they're thinking about is, oh my God, what if it fails for me?
Yeah.
I can't have that. I can't do that. That is not the right way to go about it.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, man. Hectic.
So how do you deal with the failure? Like, not failure, but, you know, I suppose you audition a lot, right? And you don't exactly get all the jobs. So how do you deal? How do you come back from that time and time again to audition again?
One thing is learning the nature of the game and nature of the beast, where it's just like, even the top actors out there, like, auditioned, or especially back in the day, would have been like doing at least one a day or like two a day back in LA, you know what I mean? And you just get used to auditioning, and you just get used to, like, you work as hard as you can, you prepare as best as you can, you do the audition, and then you just let it go. And if you get the call, you get the call. If you get a call back, sweet. If your agent calls you and says you booked the role, sweet. But you just, like, learn how to let it go. Like, it just doesn't serve anyone to be like thinking about, oh, I hope they watched it, I hope they liked it, I hope they call me. That's one thing.
Kind of like when you ask out a chick.
Process.
Kind of like when you ask out a chick. Yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
had a good time. Here's my number. Call me if you want to hang out. That's it.
yeah. But if you and just setting the expectation, because if you expect that like, oh, I need to book 75% of my auditions, you're like, bro, like that's just not going to happen, you know? And knowing, oh, here's another part. Specifically with acting, there is so much that's out of your control. Like you could be so close to a role, and they're just like, we just went with this person because they just had a different vibe and different energy that we want to lead the movie, and that's it. There's nothing wrong with you. You were fucking amazing, but there's nothing you did wrong. Or maybe it's we went with this person because we are casting a dad, and this person looks more like this person than you do, and that's why we're going to cast this person. You guys were both really good, but and you're just like, well, how do you control that? There is no control in it, and you just have to understand. Like, that's why I'm just like the best thing is you can just let go of the result and just know you did your best and move on because that's what's the best thing for your mental health and for the rest of the auditions you do. Um, I also think on a deeper level, the more that I detached my self worth from my acting, the better my acting got. And the better and the more jobs I booked and auditions I booked because I was actually able to have fun in the audition room and experiment and play and not try and get it right. Usually the actors um kryptonite is people pleasing and trying to get it right and trying to please the director. The paradox is then you're not free and you're not exploring and you're not your authentic self. Um, that took a lot of work. I remember working with a coach about that and being like, Jose, you're not just an actor. So if you're not acting, it doesn't mean you're a piece of shit, and you're not enough and you're not worthy because acting isn't your identity. But if it is, then that attachment happens.
Mm. It reminds me of Asian Eastern philosophies, which is not being too attached, not being too
Not
attached to
attachment.
anything really. Most things in life pretty much don't deserve as much attachment as we give it, like money, career. There are some things I think we should be firmly attached to, but there are most things extrinsic to ourselves in the material way. They're not worth being attached to.
What do you think are the ones that are worth attached to? The that not extrinsic or intrinsic or whatever it is.
It is slightly extrinsic. I This is my own personal view, personal value, which is how are your interactions with your fellow human being. So there's like probably three that if you get right, I can almost guarantee that you'll always live a pretty joyful life. Having good interactions with the elders, having good interactions with strangers, and having good interactions with children. If you have those three, you're most likely going to be good to your friends. But I think if you are not good to your elders, something is wrong, because these people, they are essentially the reason you have what you have. They built the platform, and they're the wisdom, their wisdom. Then strangers is basically, how do you treat somebody who has no attachment to you whatsoever? You don't know this person. How you treat them is probably how you treat yourself. And then children, the future. They are innocent, they are playful, they are bright balls of light. And if you don't treat them well, you got a dark soul, man. Like, that's a child that's done nothing to you ever. So I think if you anchor yourself to those three things as worthy attachments and things to live by, you can't really go wrong. And it's got nothing to do with money. You are in complete control of how you interact with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I would reframe it. I wouldn't use the word attachments there. And one, I love everything that you said. Those 3 points are absolutely amazing. I agree with them 100%. I would have my view on that would be like, I have the utmost intention of having those. But I feel like if you have an attachment to that, what happens when you have a wrong interaction with an elder? What happens to things is the same sort of suffering you would have to any other attachment you would have with money or relationships or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But man, that's awesome, bro. I
Yeah.
was
I
gonna
think,
ask you, that's the second time you mentioned sort of ancient Asian wisdom. Is that something you've explored, or is there a specific sort of spiritual or religious sort of thing you're prescribed to, or Where does this understanding or knowledge come from?
My own investigations into Buddhism, I got really heavily influenced in my year of travel, I would say. I spent most of my time in Southeast Asia, and I learned a lot about how Buddhism really influences a group of people.
Mm.
And I was on the receiving end of so much gratitude and so much affection from so many people. And then my own meditation journey gave me some real deep insights. And perhaps I shouldn't even label it Asian wisdom. I should just call it wisdom. But where I learned it from was through the Asian texts, because
Yeah.
it also exists in the Egyptians and probably
Yeah.
wherever you go, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, spiritual wise, that's probably where it goes. In terms of the actual investigation, I've taken more of the Asian texts to look at. Yeah, so that I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I find it really interesting when we start to talk about ancient civilizations, right? Like ancient, whatever was in China, Asia, even like ancient India, and all these different things with like Hinduism and Buddhism. Like, how did we go from a society that was so, like, think about like some Buddhist monk, so peaceful, so calm, like so much emphasis on like breath and calmness and mindfulness, to like, if you look at like what the epitome of Asia could be now, like solid, just like Singapore, not 9 to 5, like 14-hour days or whatever it is, and just hustle, 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 hustle. I think about, you know, that like Indian joke that people have on the internet with like Indian men being like really creepy with women online, being like, "Show me Bob's and Vagine." Do you remember that
Mm,
meme? How
mm,
did we get to that
mm,
when those were the guys that were teaching Kama Sutra and the most ancient, like tantric, spiritual, orgasmic sex in the world to this?
mm.
Like, does that baffle your mind? Like, there's all these things that come from our heritage and our and whatever it is back in the day, to like how we travel to what we look like now as a society.
No. And I think I have a pretty good explanation as to why I think it has happened.
What do you think?
It's not really what I think, because it's also from, I'm not the only person who shares this view.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But yeah, I would conform more to this view, which is when the Enlightenment happened and the scientific method became the pinnacle of thinking, that led to the destruction of spirituality for the next 200 years. So when
Mm,
people started to believe that their minds were the only things that could rationally interpret the world,
mm,
spirituality started to decline. And so we saw the rapid industrialization of the UK, for example, and then they took over India. The English went into India. They brought in their systems, and then the Indians conformed, and they'd taken some of that. They had a spiritual destruction. Like, there are many artifacts and sacred sites that were destroyed in that aspect. And that trickled into other areas too. It's not just India. Like, China had their own spiritual deaths, I suppose. When Chairman Mao decided to start the Cultural Revolution, he destroyed a lot of ancient artifacts and ancient history of the Chinese. He
mm,
even completely rewrote the alphabet. So there were a lot of things, yeah, from the Chinese history that were destroyed in the last 200 years, and they have now lost that.
mm,
And then you got also globalization, the countries that are rising economically, in order for other countries to hold their own in terms of military power, they also need economic development. If you
mm,
have money, you can build weapons. If you have weapons, then nobody can come and take over. Because history has shown us, the bigger your guns, the bigger your bombs, the more you control the world and you control other countries. And no country wants to be controlled by another country.
mm,
Yeah, so I think it started off with the scientific mind, when we started to think that our mind is all there is. And then that led to an industrialization. That in itself led to rapid technology development, weapons, economic growth. And then they went into other countries that destroyed things. They used Western arrogance to overtake Eastern spirituality and even African spirituality, Egyptian, wherever you want to go. Like even in South America, the ancient the
Incas and
Peruvians,
the
like all those guys had their own, but they were all killed. Like they were all destroyed, killed. All of that happened. So that's where I think it happened. But I also think now there is a rebound because we're now seeing that the whole Western way of thinking is not all there is. It's lacking something.
Dude, wow, what an explanation. That was fucking awesome.
Have you heard that
Wow.
one before?
I not to that depth on that
Right.
level. I'd heard the one of like, yeah, no, and not with that specificity of the examples. I sort of just saw how like just the wave of how just like one culture from wherever it was. I didn't know it was the UK. I thought maybe it was America that sort of just like wiped the whole world and just influenced the whole world with different values, and then you just lose the core ties to those ancient, sacred, spiritual beliefs and practices and whatnot. And it's really interesting. A lot of the work that I do with Dr. Espin and that company is like what Dr. Espin's really good for is he's been really good at combining spirituality with what like people are with quantum science and with neuroscience and being like, hey, look at all these different beliefs and different traditions and different principles that they had here. That's starting to map up with what people are defining as like quantum science and the work from Dr. Bruce Lipton with the biology belief and epigenetics and stuff. It's just I'm no expert in it. I just prescribe really to the work, and I wouldn't be able to explain it to you. But man, it's really interesting the wave that's coming back, and it's really interesting that I find that a lot of people shit on this, and I don't. It really pisses me off how like spirituality or modern day spirituality or whatever you want to fucking call it is really like white people love that. They love that shit. Ubud's like filled with it. You know what I mean? Like chakras and crystals and beads and this and that. They love it. And then people talk shit about it. They're like, man, they're reaping the benefits of it. Everyone should have access to it if this is going to serve you in your life, you know, from whatever thing, you know. I know some different religions would prescribe against it, but like if it serves you and it helps you in that moment, then man, I'm all for it.
Well, you just mentioned something which is on the basis of what I said earlier, the arrogance of the mind. What a lot of people will say, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. The act of trying to make sense of it is the arrogance, because you think that it needs to make sense for you in order for it to be real. But as I'm sure Dr. Espin, was it Dr. Espin?
Yeah.
He's now used epigenetics. Like it basically is the blueprint for reincarnation, which is in Buddhism. Buddhism talks about reincarnation, and epigenetics seems to point to the fact that what you go through in one life is replicated in the next life as a gene pass on. So like even going back to how you were talking about how you thought the Americans were the ones who like influenced the world. This is true after World War II. Because they came out economically really powerful. However, before that, like your Filipino background, yeah? Right? Why can the Filipinos speak Spanish?
The Spanish had us from like the 1500s until whenever it was, the 18, 19, until the Americans came in. I thought the Americans saved us. My uncle's like, nah, man, they fucked us up too. I was like, oh shit. I had
Exactly.
no clue.
So a lot of the Filipinos can speak Spanish because the Spanish went. And then if you look at parts of Africa, New Caledonia, the French are there. They can speak
The
French. Like, why can you
Portuguese.
speak French? Portuguese as well. Why can the Brazilians speak Portuguese? Why can the South Americans speak Spanish? Why can the Indians speak English? Like you can just look at the trail. The Commonwealth countries, the Commonwealth countries are all countries that England decided to colonize. And so like you can see it. You can see it's all there. Even if they try to erase history and say like, oh, we went in there, we gave them support, all that shit. Like, why did you use your language to take over their language? You know what I mean?
Interesting, right?
You know what I mean? In
It's really
Lebanon,
interesting.
they can speak French.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, why?
Some in some
Why?
parts, right? Crazy.
So yeah. So like if we just understand a bit about history, you can see that a lot of this stuff, in fact, most of the religions that have boomed are the ones who were spread by the colonizers.
Christianity. Man, it's so interesting. Like Filipino. Oh my God, this imagine this for a household, right? So my mom talks about how like when I was a kid, we went back to the village in the Philippines, and I wouldn't stop crying, and she takes me to the witch doctor, and I'm like, Mom, I thought we were Catholics. Like, what do you mean witch doctor? And like, oh, they have it like there in the village and stuff. And then like I'm starting to realize now that like there's so many ancient tribal, probably shamanistic roots in countries like the Philippines, similar to what it would have been in like Indonesia or in Bali. But because Christianity came, the Spanish came, like wiped it all out. And now you have like these beautiful devout Christians. But I'm like, there would be an essence of like that. And she was even saying like there was like there's spirits in your uncle's house, but they're good spirits. And I'm like, what? Like, what is going on here? Like this duality of like conservative Western religion and like shamanism or what do you want to call it, tribalistic things. Like I'm sure I'd be so interested to travel back in time and see what the state of those societies or those communities or tribes, whatever they were, before the Spanish came.
Mm.
Like oh man, I feel like we just be doing a full circle to all the stuff that is coming about and becoming popularized now
Well, the
with things like
interesting
breath work
thing,
and plant medicine.
yeah, well, I mean, plant medicine in itself is a very shamanic uh, thing, but I think the
Mm,
interesting full circle that's happening is the death of religion started in the West, but now the rise of spirituality is starting to take up, like in their own hometown, it's starting to rise. And
mm,
I sometimes look at the shit that's being put out, and I see no difference from the religions that they have killed. Like, you are loved, you are worthy, there you are deep essence, all this sort of shit. Good for you, like good for you. But I also know that in the Bible it says very explicitly, you are made in God's image, you are loved, God loves you no matter what, you are worthy. They've just removed the God and
mm.
given people the same words but removed the God.
Yeah, it's so interesting how I find, to your point, how like religions or even people will argue over semantics of words and they, well, this word means this. And I'm like, bruv, like there's so much more than just the words that are being used. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can go on and on about this. I didn't know the conversation would go this far. I had no idea you were so philosophical and into this sort of stuff. I thought we were going to talk like mindset,
Well, we're
Asians.
gonna go. Well, I was gonna move into that now, which is your Asian men's coach. What is that? Like, what are you trying to help Asian men with?
What I'm trying to help Asian men with is, and I was literally speaking to my coach about this and getting more granular around it, similar to my story, where it's like, hey, if that traditional Asian formula doesn't work for you, you're going to spend the rest of your life adhering to that formula and not living a truly fulfilled life, living a life that you want. I know there's so many Asian men out there who follow the formula to either please their parents or are afraid of breaking the mold, that are probably working jobs that they don't like and doing things that they don't want to do. And what I don't want and what I want to help people to do is when they get on their deathbeds, that they're just like, have you read that book, What's Who's a Boner, by Brene Brown? But that palliative nurse, the Australian palliative nurse, where she interviewed the top 10 regrets of the dying, right? And she interviewed all these people. She was a palliative nurse. And one of the most common regrets was, I wish I lived a life that was true to me and not to other people. And I know that's such a common thread through Asian communities to be like, you have to fit this mold. And what I want to help people do is to release and let go of all the whatever belief systems and bullshit that isn't serving them anymore and help them live the best life that they want to. That also comes along with probably the Asian trauma of not being able to, like we mentioned at the start of the potty, like asking for what you want comes down to like being able to set boundaries and communicate things and being able to stand up to people. All things that I had to learn to do because I wasn't equipped with those. And the default programming that was given wasn't of that. That's where it's at the moment. And I know that one thing we're talking about how white people love this self-development stuff. I rarely see a lot of Asian people come through our rooms, and even like other conferences I've been to, like Tony Robbins, there's a few entrepreneurial, different, like critical thinking sort of people that I see. But I just know there's just so much potential for the Asian community there if they really took this by the horns and were like, oh my God, this is fucking amazing. And watching it spread like a fucking food truck fucking trend, you know what I mean? Like it's just yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, although I do have
What are
some
your thoughts on it? Do you see it out there?
uh
Well, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on what you think the state of the community or what's current trending out there at the moment in terms of where people are at.
so I would honestly say that I'm not completely on board with the movement toward the like liberation of Asians, for example. Like
Mm,
and the reason I say that is because if you take the current Asians in Sydney, in like Australia,
mm,
and you see what they're doing, and then you plot them in their home country of say like Philippines or China, wherever, they would be doing very, very well.
in terms of
So like if well, let's talk about one common one, which is setting boundaries with your family. That's a common one
yeah,
within Asian. That lack of boundary, so to speak, that we have, for example, that lack of boundary isn't a problem in if you put me in China and I grew up there, that's not a problem. Because we've all grown up with the mindset that yeah, it's we just help each other. This is how it is. You know what I mean? So part of the clash
I
that
get what you're saying.
part of the clash that I see is we are looking at it from a lens that has been given to us or we have learnt
The
from
Western
being in
lens.
this country,
Mm,
right? Because when I was in Thailand, for example, I'll give you a very, very easy, common, like easy example. Walking around in Thailand, if I see that we are headed for a collision course because it's packed, 5 meters away,
driving or
walking, like on a subway, for
okay.
example,
Yeah,
5 meters
yeah.
away, you and both of us will begin moving right away because within that ecosystem, we all know, oh yeah, right away, we don't own the road, let's move. Over here, that doesn't always happen. You're in my way, I'm walking this way, I'm not moving out of the way for you. So if I was over here, I could perceive it to be a problem, but if I'm over there, it's not a problem.
Mm. I
So
get what you're saying. And what are you saying that the different the liberation that I'm speaking about or the movement is within this set culture, but would actually be completely irrelevant in cultures back home, and it's actually only relevant in Western countries.
yeah, yeah, like
Yeah,
there's
I
a
agree with
huge
that.
element of that where I think this whole like live the life that you want, set boundaries. I'm not saying it's necessarily negative in my mind.
Um,
However, if setting a boundary means that you are going to lose the fabric of your own culture within your household, with your family, for example, then I'm not necessarily for it either. You know,
mm.
like this whole boundary thing is very, in my opinion, it's almost manufactured. Okay, because if you look at children,
Elaborate on this, and let's get really specific on what boundaries we're talking about and what instances.
like let's use a easy example, like in the house, family. Okay, you're you're you don't want to say something to your parents, for example. They ask you something, they're being
Mm.
nosy. You just leave me alone, sort of thing. Would you consider that to be a
Mm.
common boundary that Asians face?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. Yeah. Okay. The idea that I need to set a boundary because that is healthy probably doesn't exist back in Asia that much. You just ask me a question, you're my family, I'm gonna tell you.
Mm.
right? But over
Why
here,
do you think that is? Do you think that
culturally,
things are different over there in terms of like not culturally, but the reasons why someone maybe in a Western country wouldn't open up to a parent is different to maybe what it might be back in a different country?
besides culture, besides culture, um, at the moment, I can't really think of the complete reasons because culture encompasses so much. Western psychology, I think, is big on boundaries, like the
Mm,
part of the thing, right? However, I would also say that a child has no boundaries.
mm,
A child, as in, but we're looking at a child not from the parent interacting. I'm looking at from the child interacting with the parent. When a child is hungry, they go to their parent. Boom, right away. When a child wants to talk, goes to the parent. When it wants to cry, goes to the parent. There's no boundary there.
mm,
It's actually almost natural for a human being to want to just go to another human being.
mm.
So
Interesting.
yeah,
Oh, so are you saying because as children we don't have boundaries and therefore as adults we don't really necessarily need boundaries? Is that what you're saying?
you don't necessarily learn, you don't necessarily have a natural boundary as like a normal course of human interaction, is what
Mm.
I'm saying. Like
This is
a,
really interesting.
a boundary is taught to a child. It's not, it's that like I'm talking real biologically natural things. A child would go, we eat, this is natural, right? But
Mm,
fasting is not. You don't fast unless you are given a position where you have no food. But if you have food near you and you are hungry, you will eat until you are satisfied or full. Then you carry on with your life, right?
mm.
Children are the same. Like unless you told a child, hey, do not talk to me between 6 and 8 o'clock. If they are understanding of that, they won't talk to you from 6 to 8. But prior to that, they would have talked to you anytime between those hours.
Mm.
And so within Asian culture, I feel like they don't do that as much. They don't set that boundary. They don't teach it as a thing. And so like this need to set a boundary, it's only a problem because somebody said it was a problem.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And so where I'm,
Let
sorry, I'll just finish this last part. Where I see the
yeah,
problem
yeah.
with this whole thing is that boundary that we set in this small example in like an Asian household, that boundary you set will destroy other things that the lack of boundary was was giving you, right?
Mm,
If I say to you, Jose, don't talk to me between like 6 and 8, and you're my kid, for example,
yeah.
that kid might not just not talk to you from 6 to 8. That kid might not call you when he needs help. That kid might not do many things because you set that boundary and you've now
Mm.
destroyed something that was not just about the boundary.
I completely agree with you in the context of when we're talking about children and adults.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on when we're talking about adults and adults? So, like a boundary might be, and this whole scope goes outside of just like boundary settings. It even goes to like, how do we get people out of fight or flight because they've just been living in fight or flight from their whole time because that's how their parents sort of just immigrated with and just brought. Like I know that's sort of my family. Like I see them, mum will just stress even if there's nothing to stress about. And I'm like, mum, just chill out. And she's like, I am chilled out, but I can see her body response is complete fight or flight. Um, but going back to boundaries, what about like between adults? Do you not think that that's
Like
healthy?
like family, or you mean just like strangers?
Families, strangers, because let's say someone grew up not being able to, let's say an Asian child grew up being a people pleaser, didn't know how to set boundaries, and then grew up and then as an adult isn't actually able to set healthy boundaries when that actually serves them. Maybe like with work with their boss to say, oh, actually, no, I don't want to work today because I want to hang out with my family or whatever it is. Do you think that would be useful?
If they're being honest with what they want, then yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Okay.
that would be useful. But I wouldn't consider that setting a boundary.
Really? What would you
You're
define that
just saying
as?
what you want. Just saying what you want.
It's saying But would saying what you want if you don't want something to happen, or if you're setting parameters, would that not count as a boundary? Or what's your definition of boundary? Actually, that's probably a better question.
My definition of a boundary is where it's like you make a rule. Like this is not gonna happen.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Okay, no,
this
that's
is a
not my
rule.
that's not my yeah.
What's
We
your
should define
definition?
that.
Yeah, what's your
My
definition?
definition of boundary is just setting it doesn't necessarily have to be a rule. It just could be like, hey, um, I don't like being touched this specific way, and I'd appreciate if you didn't touch me that way. If someone's really rough with you, like that's a boundary.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, in that case, then
Yeah.
we're probably both in agreement. Like I don't like like
This whole thing actually
yeah,
agreeing.
yeah. Like but at the same time, there's other stuff like if your parents ask you about stuff, like in a home, because a lot of this comes back to the home. If your parents ask you for something, removing the idea of a boundary. If you want to say no, I don't want to tell you, not right now, or maybe never, go for it. That happens in every
Mm,
culture. But
mm,
to label some things a problem that isn't a problem overseas,
mm.
in my mind, is not really a problem. The problem is the labeling.
So you're saying labeling as Asian is the labeling? Sorry, labeling as Asian is the problem, and being like this is only thing for
Labeling that
Asians.
Asian problem
Yeah.
that only occurs in, say, Australia, that same thing doesn't occur in wherever they're from, isn't a
Mm.
problem. Like that's not a problem. It's labeling that problem is the problem.
Say that again. What do you mean?
So if you have a problem, perceived problem in this country,
Mm.
that same problem is not a problem overseas,
Mm-hmm.
then the problem isn't what you're dealing with. The problem is somebody told you it was a problem.
I get what you're saying. However, wouldn't that still be a perceived problem to deal with in this current situation, even if it's not a problem in a different situation? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and this is what the bit of the mental gymnastics, which is dealing with the problem is actually more problematic. Because if it wasn't a problem to begin with, in another country, for example, if it wasn't a
Mm.
problem to begin with, then you're solving something that doesn't need solving, and that
I
creates more
agree.
problems.
I agree. Can you give me an example besides the boundary part? Let's
You
move
you
on from
you
that
you
part.
pick one that you work with a lot with Asians.
I'm thinking out loud, and I'm actually in agreement with your point. Like one example being like, oh, I want to live this sort of life, right? Like even me as in being like, I want to be an actor, and my parents saying, no, you can't be an actor. That isn't a problem over in the Philippines because there is no opportunity to become an actor. However, that still doesn't negate the fact that you're still, in my opinion, limiting or repressing someone's expression or their potential or what they want to do because they actually have the opportunity to do that here in a Western country. And just to clarify, the whole thing is just to help people that on the same journey that I've been through. And that's the archetype that I found. Like, oh, I can just see so many common threads here, but that's only specifically to Western countries. I definitely don't think the stuff that I'd offer would be things. Actually, it could be depending on different parts of Asia. Some parts of Asia are really westernized and really modern. Um, let's go with people pleasing. Do you think people pleasing could be one that would be different here compared to?
Are we still talking about family or just in general?
Yeah. Well, let's say it goes to family and then it extends to work and then extends to other places as well. And then it can extend to relationships.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the people pleasing one, I'll use Chinese. Right? Chinese, Chinese philosophy culture would be you are good to your parents, and some of that would include people pleasing. Right? You want to please your parents. Some of that
Interesting.
would
Even at your own detriment.
uh-huh. But if you're over there, it is not to your detriment
Why?
because culturally you believe that it is your duty. It is your responsibility to be good to your parents.
What if being good to your parents and being good to yourself then come at a clash?
Then
And
it
then you have to
depends.
choose.
Then it depends on what's happening, like very context specific. But it's a balance of both.
Mm,
But most people would probably have a little bit of both.
mm. And just for context, I'm defining people pleasing as doing things that's out of alignment than what you would want to do or would feel called to do because you're trying to please someone from a place of I do not feel enough, and therefore I'm trying to please these people.
So that definition alone, I don't even think that really exists in a lot of Asian countries over there. Like I don't even think they even would have that in their vernacular. Like, do you do things out of the intention of not feeling like you're enough?
Mm,
I don't even think they have that in many Asian countries. And so you using that as an example is what I'm saying. It's a Western manufactured problem because what you just
mm.
described is Western psychology.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I'd love to spend more time in Asia to see some of these, and maybe it could be I'm referencing parts of the Philippines, which are in actual fact just actually quite very westernized because of the American influence. And I'm like, maybe in the village in like
Yeah,
I
look,
don't
I
know,
mean, if you look at
Thailand,
like
whatever.
in China, even in Thailand, in China they have a saying where it's like it is it is a it is a sign of character, strength to endure,
Mm,
to endure. Very different to something Western that might be, it is you got to speak up, you got to fight back. No, with Chinese, it is seen as a strength to endure. And so endure might mean I will endure the hardship of this job because I need to provide for my family. Or I will
mm.
endure the hardship of this relationship because I want to keep the peace in the family. So that is culturally something different that they have. And same as the Thais. The Thais have this saying where it's like, I think I'm gonna butcher it, but it's May Wen Rai, I think, which is like, let it go. Not a big deal. Let it go. You piss me off? Okay, let it go. You wanna ask me questions that I don't want to answer? Maybe I answer you. Let it go. Like
Mm.
that's how they see things. So for them, some of the problems that we are
They
talking
don't
about,
they don't even perceive the problem to begin with because their belief systems doesn't allow whatever circumstance to even be perceived as a problem. Wow.
exactly.
Okay, now I get you. I
Yeah,
get you. Wow.
exactly.
Very
And
interesting.
that's where I push back against some of this stuff. Not you specifically,
No, 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 that's all good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it's like, okay, you and I are in a very interesting position where we are East and West combined. We have a foot in the Eastern culture, and we have a foot in the Western culture. And now I'm seeing so much Western psychology, which let's branch it under Western medicine. Let's branch it
Yep.
just there for the sake of. But there is also Eastern medicine, Eastern ways of doing things. And to perceive this as an issue from the lens of this side is unjust. Because
Mm,
at the same token, people on this side perceive this side to be problematic. Like, for example, some Asians, I spoke with Asians when I was in Vietnam, and they say, why do white people never look after their family? For example, why is the aged home industry, retirement industry, so big?
so big in Australia when that wouldn't even be a thing in that culture.
It's not a thing in most Asian cultures. You look after your elderly,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
to I'm going to use the word boundary setting, okay, which is there's a um there's like a movement, not movement, but it's like an ideology.
Mm,
I live my life. I don't want to look after you. I live my life. I'm setting that boundary of you can't be asking me for all this help. You got to look after yourself because don't be a
mm,
burden on my life.
mm.
Okay. That what has that created? It's created disintegration of their extended families, all people in nursing homes, from the Eastern perspective, they're looking at that going, what the fuck's going on? What are you guys doing?
It's like when you rock up at a party, there's no food. You're like, bro, what's going on, lad?
Exactly. And then in reverse, they look at like, why are you still living with your parents? Why
Yeah.
are they in your house? You know what
Yeah.
so you know what I mean
Yeah,
now? Like
I do.
that's why I see
It's
it like, let's be careful.
I totally get your point now. I totally get your point, and I'm so on board with what a lot what you're saying. What's going through my mind right now is it's really interesting that like, especially growing up, and it's hard when you're in like we have this duality of East and West, where it's like we were raised at home in like an Eastern household. Like my household was a Filipino household. I'm not even talking about food, just the values, the culture, what was okay, what wasn't okay. But then we go out into the world, into school, into university, into dating, into the workforce, and it's a Western world. And we're like, Mom, Dad, you didn't give me the controls, and I don't know how to play the game that's outside of this house. What do I do? I find that duality is super interesting, and I guess that's a big source of where I guess the work that I do and the people I'm trying to help comes from, which is really really interesting in
Yeah,
the
I think
journey that I've been on, so to speak. You know.
yeah, well, it sounds like if you were able to integrate them,
Mm.
how do you navigate your identity without neglecting your upbringing and integrating this in this other society that if you can find a way to integrate that, then with respecting both, then you will probably find a great solution.
Yeah. And the ancient Egyptians are probably looking at us being like, what the fuck are these people doing, man? Shit. Just
Like they
fucking
the crazy thing is, man, if you look back far enough, they predicted all of this.
were into all of this like, in terms of what's happening now. You're talking like,
They predicted the death of religion. They
mm,
predicted the resurgence of religion
mm,
and spirituality, and they predicted arrogance of the mind. They predicted a lot of
wow.
things, man.
And we still, and do I love talking about arrogance of the mind? We still can't fucking come up with how they put the pyramids there. And we come up with all these things like, oh, well, they did it like this, they did it like, bruv, you weren't there. How do you know?
Exactly. We still can't figure out a lot of things, like how the Aztecs and the Mayans built their stuff either.
But do I love that the arrogance of the mind goes, well, it must have been this sort of thing. And if we can't figure it out, no one can figure it out.
Like,
And
how
if
could
you
they
think
do
you
it?
have the, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, right? How could
yeah,
they do it? And then which baffles the mind to be like, well, then they must know something that you don't know. But then you're like, must be something else. And if anyone tries to come up with any woo-woo, stupid, magical spirituality, rah, rah, alien sort of bumbo jumbo, you're an idiot because we know better.
exactly. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's that arrogance, man.
Yeah.
Oh, but Jose,
Man,
honestly, this was
what
a
an
great chat,
awesome
man.
chat, dude.
It
What
was
the fuck?
that was a great chat.
Dude, we
Thanks
should
for
have
joining me,
solved.
man.
Thank you for having me, man. We should have got rid of the ping pong. The ping pong was great, but we should have got our teeth sunk into this stuff, man. This was
Yeah, well,
awesome, bro.
next time.
Yeah,
Just in
for
case any
sure,
of the
man.
guys, because a lot of the guys who listen, they are a lot of them, I think, are Asian guys. If they want to find you, if they want to reach out to you and ask for your help, where can they find you?
The best place to contact me is on my Instagram. You'll see a lot of my content there that I'm going to be posting about this sort of Asian stuff, and it's Jose Talite. So it's JoseTalite on Instagram. Can't wait for this to come out, bro. This has been sick. So many clips, man. We're gonna clip the shit out of this, bro. There's so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
good in this, man. Wow, you were spitting fire, bro. There was some gold nuggets you were just dropping. I was like, whoa,
Thanks, brother.
dude,
Thanks, brother. You yourself as well.
dude.
This was honestly one of really, really enjoyable chat.
Yeah, man. Dude, we should do some mushrooms and just keep chatting about this shit later.
We'll do a mushroom podcast.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that'd be crazy. That'd be crazy.
Anyway,
Um,
guys, thank you for listening. Jose, thank you again for joining me on the podcast today. And I'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, bro. It's been a pleasure.